So good day everyone. So I'm here reporting linear programming simplex maximization method containing greater than symbol. Simplex method of linear programming was created by George B. Danzig of Stanford University. It is a method of repeated optimization until an optimal solution is found. The process is mathematically repeated by shifting from one extreme point to another extreme point. The simplex approach can handle an unlimited number of variables in contrast of the graphical. Simplex maximization problem containing greater than symbol. If the constraint has a greater than symbol, we cannot transform it to an equation by immediately adding a slack number. Instead, we first convert the greater than symbol into less than symbol by multiplying the inequality constraint by -1. Then add a slack variable of slack number. So for example, so greater than man ang symbol, no? So in order to make it less than symbol, we multiply it the same inequality constraint by -1. So ang kalabasan niyan is -1 times x is -x. And then -1 times y is -y. So less than na siya because of the negative. And then -1 times 2 is -2. So if x minus y. So less than naman ang symbol niya. So pwede na tayo mag-add ng slack number. Plus s sub 9 n equals to -2. So yan. So let's move on to the next slide. So problem number 1. A farmer is planning the cultivation of two crops, crop A and crop B. Crop yields a profit of $50 per acre and crop B yields a profit of $20 per acre. The farmer has a certain constraints on the cultivation of these crops. The total acreage for crop A cannot exceed 15 acres. The total acreage for crop B cannot exceed 25 acres. The combined acreage for both crops must be at least 30 acres. Acreage for each crop cannot be negative. How many acres of crop A and crop B should be the farmer cultivate to maximize the total profit considering the given constraints? So, the first step we do is write the objective function and the constraints, then transform the objective function into equation formed by having all the variables written on the left-hand side. Also, transform the constraints into equation formed by adding a slack variable. So, we will write the objective function. So, kanina is the acreage for crop A cannot exceed 15 acres. So, it is not exceeded. So, less than 15. And same din sa crop B na dili mag-exceed sa 25. And it must be at least 30 acres. So, greater than 30. And so, i-convert na natin to into, or we add the slack variables since we have a less than symbols. So, since we have a greater than symbol, so we make it into a negative, like this, into multiplying by negative 1. So, ang kalabasan niyan is negative x minus y. Then, maging less than symbol na to kasi nag-multiply tayo ng negative 1. And we add the slack variable. So, s sub 3 equals to negative 30 x y. So yan ang constraints natin sa problem. So next is, after we identify the constraints, we plug in numerical coefficients of the variables on the simplex tableau and compute the values for the zj and cj. C sub j minus z sub j row values. So ito yung tableau. So this is the C sub j. Ito. And then, yung mga slack variables natin. And in order to get these Z sub j, is to multiply the C sub j sa mga constraints. So, parang ganito. Since C sub j is all 0, then, para makuha yung Z sub j, is we multiply the C sub j sa mga constraints. So, C sub j natin is So yan, na-multiply na natin yung mga CJ sa C sub J sa mga constraints. So, since 0 man, 0 lahat, 0 times 1. So, ang equal niyan is 0. As well as dito, dahil 0 nga. So, all 0. So, makita natin dito, ito na, yung mga 0. Ito. Makita nyo. So, in order to get these C sub J and Z sub J, is we subtract the C sub J from the Z sub J. So, ito yung mga C sub J natin. So, 50, 20, 0, 0, and 0. So, sulat natin. So, i-minus natin ito, itong C sub J and Z sub J. So, 50 minus 0 is still 50. 20 minus 0 is 20. And 0, 0. So, as you can see, ito na yung pagkalagay ng mga C sub J and C sub J minus C sub J rows sa tableau. So the next step is determine the pivot column by scanning for positive coefficient in the C sub J minus Z sub J row. The most positive value will be the pivot column. So, as you can see, na para makuha natin yung pivot column is i-identify natin yung most positive value ng C sub J minus Z sub J row. So, sa nakita natin dito is 50 yung most positive value. So, yan ang positive column natin. Ito. And then, for the itong line na to, ito is yan ang pivot row. So compute for the test ratio by dividing the entire of the quantity column by the non-zero and non-negative entries of the pivot column. The smallest pivot ratio will determine the pivot row. So identify natin yung pivot row na makita natin dito sa column na non-negative or non-zero. And meron din yung yung test ratio, which is ito. Test ratio. R is equals to, diba nakasulat doon is 15 divide 1 equals to 15. So, ganyan lang yung pagkuha sa pivot row. I-divide natin yun. And yung pinakamaliit na test ratio is yun yung pivot row natin. But madali lang dun din pag ma-identify mo na non-negative or non-zero siya. And then, itong naka-intersect sa pivot column and pivot row is 1. So, yan yung pivot element natin. Naka-intersect siya sa pivot row and pivot column. So, pivot element will be 1. So, the next step we do is convert the pivot element into 1. So we divide each entry in the pivot row by the pivot element. So yung pivot row is S sub 1, di ba? So the pivot element is we divide each column in the pivot row, like 15, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0. So, itong S sub 1. So, pag i-divide natin, which is 1 lang man lang din ang pivot element natin, so same lang pa rin yung value niya. So, since na-change natin yung like this itong S sub 1 because of the to compute for the new values for each remaining rows and columns, follow this formula. So, if we change the S sub 1, we need to change the other rows then. To change that, meron tayong formula. Element in old row minus yung associated element found in pivot row times element found in the pivot column. All over pivot element. So yan yung formula to get the to change the other rows. So next slide. So nakita natin na sulat natin yung formula. Element in old row sa S sub 3 is negative 30 and then minus the associated element found in pivot row, which is 15, times the element found in the pivot column, which is negative 1, all over the pivot element. Yung pivot element natin is 1. So, in compute that, negative 30 minus 15 times negative 1 over 1 is negative 15. Maguluhan kayo, ganito yun. Ito yung S sub 3. Yung element in old row is negative 30. Ito. And then, the associated element found in pivot row is 15. Dito makita yan sa katabi ng S sub 1. And then, the element found in the pivot column, which is negative 1, ito, katabi siya ng negative 30. Yan. Yan ang element found in the pivot column. And then, all over the pivot element. So, same lang din sa row nitong S sub 3. Same lang nating process. So, ito. So yan. Ito na yung all in all. And itong mga na gawa natin value, new value, ito yung i-change natin sa S sub 3, which is negative 15, 0, negative 1, 1, 0, 1. Punta tayo sa next slide. Yan. Nakita nyo na sa S sub 3, nag-change siya. Negative 15, 0, and negative 1, 1, 0, 1. And then, as you can see, na nag-change yung S sub 1. Di ba naging X siya? And then, 15 na yung C sub J. Kasi, yung pivot column natin, naka-pointed siya sa X. So, and na-change natin yung S sub 1. So, na-change siya. So, X and 50. And then, wag mo niyan yung pansinin to. So, wala pa yan, blank pa yan. So, ulit naman tayo sa kunin natin yung Z sub J nitong new values. So, like, parang ganito lang din na formula. So, kunin natin yung Z sub J. Yung C sub J, times natin yung sa mga constraints. So, same sa pinakita ko kanina. So, 50 na siya dahil na-change na. So yan na, yung mga C sub J sa pag-times natin sa constraints. So 50 times 15 plus 0 times 25 plus 0 times negative 15. So which is 750. Dito 50 times 1 plus 0 times 0 plus 0 times 0 is 50. Ito, 50 times 0, 0 plus 0 times 1 plus 0 times negative 1 is 0. 50 times 1 plus 0 times 0 plus 0 times 1 is 50. And dito is 50 times 0 plus 0 times 1 plus 0 times 0 is 0. 50 times 0, 0 times 0 plus 0 times 1 is 0. So yan na yung C sub J natin. Ito mga to. Yan yung C sub J. So sa pagkuha sa Z sub J, and i-input muna natin to sa tableau natin. So ito yung kalabasan niya. Ito, yung 750, 50, 0, 50, 0, and 0. So sa pagkuha din ng C sub J minus Z sub J is yung C sub J dito, ito, i-minus natin siya sa Z sub J. So, ang kalabasan niyan is ganito. C sub J natin is 50, 20, 0, sub j minus natin to. So 50 minus 50 is 0. 20 minus 0 is 20. And 0 minus 50 is 50. And 0, 0. So yan. Ito na yung C sub j minus C sub j row natin. Ito yung C sub j minus C sub j row. So, input natin siya sa table, tableau. And so, ito na. And then, napansin nyo na if there is still a positive entry in the C sub j and Z sub j row, return to step 3. Yung natin yung pangatlong step dahil may positive pa. So, napansin nyo may positive pa, which is yung 20. So, di ba pag may positive, i-identify natin yung pivot column, yung most positive value. So, which is 20. Ito, 20. And then, yung pagkuha sa pivot row is yung non-negative and non-zero value niya. So, as you can see na 0, 1, negative 1, 0. So obvious na 1 yung pivot row natin. Diba, kagaya ng sinabi ko kanina, na i-divide natin yung pivot row at saka pivot element. So, ito, parang ganito. So, obvious naman na same value lang pa rin kasi 1 lang man din ang pivot element natin sa nag-intersect sa pivot column and pivot row. So, same value lang. 25, 0, 1, 0, 1, and 0. So, yan. Yan na yung bagong pivot row sa S sub 2. So, yan na-change siya. And then, napansin nyo na yung S sub 3 is negative ulit. Negative 1. So, pag mag-change tayo ng isa ka row kasi, mag-change pa rin tayo ng other row. So, gamitin natin yung previous formula, which is ito. Yung element in old row, which is negative 15, and associated element found in the pivot row, which is 25, times the element found in the pivot column, which is negative 1. All over the pivot element. So, ang kalabasan yan is negative 15 minus 25 times negative 1 over pivot element is 1 is 10. 10. And then, same lang din sa iban na sa rows, sa sub 3. So, 0 element in old row minus this associated element in the pivot row. So 0, 1, all over the pivot element. So ito yung nakuha natin ng mga value. 10, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 1. So yan na yung bagong value ng S sub 3 row. So kita natin dito. Ito na. Na-input na natin siya sa tableau natin. Yung 10, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 1. So, blank ulit itong C sub j and C sub j minus C sub j kasi nagbago naman tayo ng value ng ating mga constraints. So in order to get the C sub j is to multiply the C sub j from the constraints. So, ulit na naman. So, ganito na process. So, kunin natin yung C sub j. So, ganito yun. Yung C sub j times the constraints, no? 50 times 15 plus 20 plus 25 plus 0 times 10 and 50 times 1 plus 20 times 0 plus 0 times 0 50 times 0 plus 20 times 1 0. So, 15 times 50 times 15 plus 20 times 25 plus 0 times 10 is 1,250. And then, we calculate lang yung lahat. So, 50, 20, 50, 20, and 0. So, ito sila. Ito yung rows as Z sub j. So, 1 to 50, 50, 20, 50, and 20. So, one to 50, 50, 20, 50, 20, 0. So, yun o. So, para makuha yung C sub j minus Z sub j row, is i-minus natin yung C sub j na nandito sa C sub j. So, C sub j natin is 50. Wala na to. Kasi, 5 lang man din yung sa C sub j and sa C sub j. So, 50, 20, and 0 and 0. So, i-minus natin to. So, 50 minus 50 is 0. 20 minus 20 is 0. 0 minus 50 is negative 50. And 0 minus 20, negative 20. And 0. So, ito na yung C sub j minus Z sub j row natin. So, next slide. Ito, yung C sub j and C sub j natin is na-input na natin siya sa ating tableau. So, since napansin niyo na wala na siyang positive value, so dyan na yung parang final answer natin. So, we decide na yung x is equal, yung x natin dito, x is equal to 15 and y to 25, and yung maximum natin is 1 to 50. So, yan na yung final answer natin. And we can verify it by substituting the variable. So, parang ganito. So, 1 to 50, di ba? Is equals to, pares kanina na 50x, yung $50 per acre, x, which is x, and plus $20 per acres din sa crop B, which is y. So, itong mga x natin dito na nakuha natin sa mga values is i-substitute lang natin dito sa mga x. So, equals to 50x, 50 times 15 natin yung x natin dito, and 20 times 25. So, i-multiply natin yan. 50 times 15 plus 20 times 25 is 1 to 50. So, tama yung nakuha natin. And, parang pwede din ganito na plus s sub 1, 15. So, x natin is 15 plus s, yung s sub 1 is 0, 15, y plus s sub 2 is equals to 25. 25 plus 0 is equals to 55. So, negative x minus y plus s sub 3 is negative 30, parang kanina na nasulat ko. So, negative 15 minus 25 plus 10 is negative 30. So, tama yung nasagutan natin. So, ito yung nakuha natin, no? So, it indicates that the maximum of profit is obtained when the x equals to 15 acres and y equals to 25 acres, resulting in a total profit of $1,250. So, let's move on to the next problem. Problem 2. A company produces two types of products, product X and product Y. The profit per unit for product X is $50, and for product Y, it is $20. The company has constraints on the production of these products. The production of product X cannot exceed 20 units, and the production of the product Y cannot exceed 30 units. The sum of the production of the both products X and Y must be at least 48 units. Production quantities cannot be negative. How many units of product X and product Y should the company produce to maximize its profit while satisfying the given constraints? So, ilagay muna natin yung constraints, no? Yung given constraints. So, ilagay natin yung mga given constraints. So, maximize the 50x plus 20y. Subject to x is less than 20 and y less than 30 and x plus y is greater than 48 and x and 0 and 0. So, nakita natin yung mga less than, mga less than and greater than symbol. So, i-add natin yung mga slack variable. So, sa x sub less than 20 is x plus s sub 1 and y plus s sub 2 equals to 30 and negative. Since we have a greater than symbol, we convert it into less than. So in order to convert it is to multiply by negative 1. So ang kalabasan natin is negative x na siya. Y plus s sub 3 negative 48. Sub 1 y s sub 1 is 0, s sub 2 is 0, and s sub 3 is 0. So sa maximize natin is 50x plus 20y plus o sa s sub 1 plus 0 s sub 2 and plus 0 s sub 3 equals to 0. Yan. So nakuha natin yung mga constraints. So lagay natin siya sa ating tableau. Next slide. Yan. Ito yung mga constraints natin. And then, pag nalagay natin yan, is yung z sub j. Identify na natin yung z sub j. So, since nalaman natin na 0 na lahat dito, yung c sub j, automatic yan 0 na yan yung z sub j mo. Kasi 0 na yung mga c sub j mo. I-multiply mo siya sa mga other constants, which is 0 lahat. So, di na natin siya kailangan i-solve pa. Kasi automatic 0 na. And then, so 0 na to, yung c sub j natin, 0 na yan. And the c sub j minus z sub j formula natin is i-subtract lang natin yung c sub j sa z sub j. Yung 50, 20, 0, and 0, and 0, subtract lang natin yan. Ito. Ito. Subtract natin yan. Dito sa z sub j. Yan. Subtract natin yan. And then, ang kalabasan yan is same pa rin. Kasi 0 lang yung i-subtract natin eh. So, 50, 20, 0, and 0, and 0. So, yan yung values natin sa C sub j and Z sub j rows. Next slide. So, to identify the pivot column is to find the most high value, no? Yung most positive value. So sa nakita natin sa C sub j and Z sub j rows is 50 yung pinakamalaki. So yan yung ano natin, yung pivot column, which is sa X pa rin. Yung pivot row is, we know that non-negative or non-zero value siya dapat. So, nakita natin sa column is yung non-negative and non-zero ay yung 1. Sa S sub 1. So, same pa rin siya, no? Diba? And then, ito. So, itong naka-intersect, ito yung pivot element natin. Then, i-divide lang natin siya sa pivot row. Then, we all know that 1 pa rin, 1 siya, i-divide siya 1, same value pa rin. So, ang kalabasan niya is ganito. Then, yung pivot column is nakatutok siya sa X. So, yung na-change natin na pivot row is ito na yung X kasi doon nakatutok yung column natin. So, nagbago ulit yung row. If we change one row, i-change natin yung iba na row. So, since ganito, yung row natin, since negative na to, 1 and 0, ito. So, itong sa baba, yung S sub 2, does not need change kasi 0 siya, di ba? And yung negative 40, yung S sub 3 is negative 1. So, we need to change the S sub 3. So, in order to change that, yung formula kanina na element in old row minus associated element found in pivot row and element found in the pivot column all over the pivot element. So, parang ito, sulat ko na lang. Yung old row, no? Ito na lang. So, negative 48 minus 20 times negative 1 all over negative, 1, which is, ang 1 is pivot element natin. So, may natin siya yan. Sulat na natin lahat. Minus 1 times negative 1 over pivot element 0 minus 0 times negative 1 over pivot element, which is number 1, and 1 minus 0 1. So 48 minus 20 times negative 1 all over pivot element is negative 28. So 0. And compute lang natin. Negative 1, 1, and 0, and 1. So, ito is ating bagong value sa S sub 3 row. Ito yung new values niya. So, let's move on. Yan. Nakita nyo sa S sub 3, na nagbago ang value niya. So, ulit na naman tayo. Magkuha na naman tayo ng Z sub j. So, in order to get the C sub j, is to multiply the C sub j sa mga constraints. So, like this. Sulat ko ulit. Yung formula sa pagkuha sa C sub j. So 50 times 20 plus 0 times 30, 0 times 50 times 1 plus 0 times 0 plus 0 times 0 and 50 times 0 plus 0 1 plus 0 times negative 1 and 50 50 So, i-calculate natin ito. 50 times 20, 0 times 30, plus 0 times negative 28 is 1,000. Ito, 50 times 1, plus 0 times 0, and 0 times 0 is 50. Ito, 50 times 0, plus 0 times 1, plus 0 times negative 1 is 0. 50 times 1 is 0. 0 times 0 plus 0 times 1 is 50. And 50 times 0 plus 0 times 1 plus 0 times 0 is 0. 50 times 0 plus 0 times 0 is 0 siya. So, ito na yung value sa z sub j row mo. So, i-input natin siya sa ating tableau. And to get the c sub j and z sub j, yung nakita natin sa table, ito yung nasa taas. So, natin yung itaas sa c sub j, which is 50, 20, 0, 0, 0. And then, yung z sub j natin, yung itong yung second to the last, ay second, from second to the last value, which is 50, and then 0, and 50, 0. So, 50 minus 50 is 0. 20 minus 0 is 20. And 0 minus 50 is negative 50. 0 and 0. So, as you can see, may positive value na naman siya. So, balik na naman tayo sa step 3. Yan, na-input na siya, di ba? So, balik tayo sa step 3. So, yung most positive value is, which is 20, yun yung pivot column natin. Di ba? And then, yung pivot row is yung non-negative and non-zero value, which is yung S sub 2. So, yung pivot element natin is yung naka-intersect is 1. So, i-divide natin yung pivot row sa pivot element. So, same value pa rin kasi 1 yung pivot element natin. So, pag-change niyan is still 30, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. Then, na-change na siya, no? And then, after that, pag mag-change tayo ng isa ka row, is we need to change other rows, di ba? So, let's see. Ito, di na ma-change to kasi 0 siya. And ito, yung S sub 3 ulit, kasi hindi pa siya 0. Negative 1 siya. So, we need to change that. In order to change that, is yung ito. Ganito na formula. Yung element in old row, which is negative 28, minus the associated element found in the pivot row, which is 30, and then times with element found in the pivot column, which is negative 1, all over the pivot element, which is 1. So, same process din sa iba na sa sub 3. Same process lang. Just copy it. So, calculate natin to. So, negative 28 minus 30 times negative 1 all over the pivot element, which is 2. Then, same lang din, 2. Same lang din sa iba. 0 and 0. So, ito, yan yung bago nating value for the S sub 3 row. So, we put it into our tableau. Next slide. Ito na. So since nagbago yung mga value natin, yung C sub j na naman is we need to solve it. So yung C sub j times the constraints. So sulat ko ulit. So 50 times 20 plus 20 times 30 plus 0 times 2 is equivalent to 16. So same lang din ito. I-add lang natin to. To calculate that. 50, 20, 50, 20, and 0 to 0. So ito yung Z sub j na row natin. So put that in table. And then yung other row is C sub j minus Z sub j. In order to get that is minus lang natin yung C sub j from the Z sub j. $50 minus 50 is 0. 20 minus 20 is 0. 0 minus 50 is negative 50. And 0 minus 20 is negative 20. And 0. So, as you can see, wala na siyang positive value. So, ito na Z sub j natin is C sub j. And then, ito na yung final answer. So, we decide na. So, x is equals to 20. So you can see the in tableau, 20 yung x. And then, yung y is equivalent to 30. And the maximum, ang maximum is yung 16. So, pwede natin i-verify ito na para ma-sure natin kung tama ba yung sinagot natin. So 16. I-substitute lang natin yung mga x and y values. So 50 times 20 plus 20 times 30. So 50 times 20 plus 20 times 30 is 1,600. So equal siya. So tama yung nasagutan natin. So it indicates that the maximum profit is obtained when x is equals to 20 units and y is equals to 30 units. So resulting in a total profit is $1,600. So Yun, nakuha na natin. So, let's move on to the last problem. So, problem 3. A company produces two types of products, product A and product B. The profit per unit for product A is $40 and for product B is $30. The company has constraints on the production of these products. The production of product A cannot exceed 25 units and the production of product B cannot exceed 40 units. The sum of the production of both products A and B must be at least 60 units. Production quantities cannot be negative. Now, you can set up the objective function and constraints similar to the previous problem and find the optimal values for the production of product A and product B to maximize the profit while satisfying the given constraints. So, in order to do that, ilagay muna natin yung mga given constraints. So, as you can see na hindi mga X and Y ang gigamit. But it same lang pa rin. A and B lang yung ginamit ko. And then, i-ano natin siya. Like, i-convert natin yung mga greater than value. And i-add na natin yung mga slack variables. So, ito. A plus sub 1. B plus ayan. So, nakuha na natin yung mga constraints natin. So, ilagay natin siya sa ating tableau. So, next slide. Ito na siya. So, as you can see na patong problem natin. So, alam na natin yung gagawin dito. So, yung C sub j, i-times natin yung mga constraints for us to get the C sub j values. So since 0 man siya, and then i-times nyo siya sa mga constraints, it's still 0. And then 0 man yung value dito, no? Ito. And then i-minus natin siya sa C sub j. So 0 man, so minus mga ganito is still the same value. So 40, 30, and 0, 0, 0. So, as you can see, positive siya, no? So, in order to identify the pivot column is itong 40. So, ito yung mas malaki yung value, na positive value. So, yan yung pivot column natin. And then, yung pivot row is non-negative and non-zero. So, yung S of 1, yung napili natin kasi hindi siya negative and hindi siya 0. So, yung na-intersect is pivot element. Alam niyo na yun. And yung pivot row, i-divide natin siya sa pivot element. And yung pivot element is 1, then same value lang pa rin. So, na-change na siya kasi i-change natin. And then, yung pag nag-change na yung isang row is to change another row na naman, which is yung S sub 3 kasi hindi siya 0. And yung S sub 2 does not need change because 0 siya. So, yun. Sulat ko yung formula sa pag-change. So, alam niyo naman yung formula. Sulat ko na lang. 25. So, ito yung z sub j values natin. And then, to know the c sub j and minus z sub j, minus natin yung c sub j sa z sub j, which is ito. Ano na siya, no? So, ito na yung, ito pala yung new values sa s sub 3 kasi nag-change tayo. Sorry. And, na-change na siya. Ito na yun. Gilayan na natin siya sa ating tableau. Kunin na naman natin yung c sub j. So, medyo nabago siya kasi may 40 na dito. Tapos, sulat ko na lang. times 25. 40 times 25 plus 0. And 30 plus 0 and 35. 40. So, calculate natin ito. Yung 40 times 25 plus 0 times 30 plus 0 times negative 35 is 1,000. And dito, 40 times 1 plus 0 is 40. 40 times 0 plus 0 times 1 plus 0 times negative 1 is 0. 40 times 1 plus 0 times 0 plus 0 times 1 is 40. 40 times 0 plus 0 times 1 plus 0 times 0 is 0. 40 times 0 plus 0 times 0 is 0. So, ito yung c sub j natin. And then, kunin na natin yung c sub j minus z sub j. So, minus na naman tayo. So, yung c sub j natin is 40, 30, 0, and 0, 0. And yung c sub j natin is 40, 0, 40, 0, and 0. So, minus natin. 40 minus 40 is 0. 30 minus 0 is still 30. 0 minus 40 is negative 40. 0. Ito yung z sub j and c sub j. So, ilagay natin siya sa c sub j minus c sub j row. Ito na siya. So, as you can see, may positive na naman siya. So, ulit na naman tayo sa step 3. So, yung most positive value is yung 30. So, yan yung pivot column. And then, yung pivot row natin is itong s sub 2 kasi ano siya, non-negative and non-zero siya value. So, change natin siya. yung pivot element natin is 1. So, same value if i-divide natin siya sa ating sa atong pivot row. And then, as you can see na negative 1. So, yung SM3 row natin. So, we need to change that. So, yung formula kanina, yung old row, which is 35 minus 40. Same process lang pa rin. This is for S sub 3 row. So, ito na yung new value natin sa S sub 3 row. So, since nagbago na naman, kunin naman natin yung Z sub j natin. Ito. So, wala muna to. So, yung Z sub j, i-times natin yung Z sub j sa mga constraints. So, ito siya. So, ito, calculate lang natin. So, 2,220. Ay, no. 2,200 lang. And, 40. 30. 40. 30. And 0. So, ito yung Z sub j values natin. So, para makuha ulit yung C sub j to my Z sub j, i-minus lang natin yung C sub j values natin. So, which is then 40. Ito yung C sub j natin and Z sub j. Minus 40 minus 40 is 0. 30 minus 30 is 0. 0 minus 40 is negative 40. 0 minus 30 is negative 30. 0 minus 0 is 0. So, as you can see na wala na siyang positive value, di ba? So, ito, ilagay natin siya sa ating tableau. So, ito na yung final answer natin. So, we decide na. So, A is equals to 25 and B is equals to 40. Sub 1 equals to 0. Sub 2 is 0 then. And S sub 3 is 0 then. And S sub 5 is itong sub 3 natin. And maximum is yung 2,200. So, the optimal solution suggests that the company should produce 25 units and of a product A, and the product B and 40 units for product B, no? And the maximum profit achievable under these constraints is $2,200. So, in order to verify it, ano lang natin, Z 40A plus 30B. Z natin is 2,200. I-distribute lang natin yung A and B. Ito. So, 2,200. So, 40 times 25 plus 30 times 40 is still 2,200. So, equal siya, no? So, yan. So, tama yung sinagutan natin. So, I think that's it. Sana may natutunan kayo and that's all. Thank you and God bless.